Welcome back, my friends. Let's see what we are going to look at today. Our objectives say to explain how innovations of early river valley civilizations affected their inhabitants and later periods in history. Innovations. Do you remember that word? What's another word for innovations? If you said inventions or new ideas, you would be absolutely correct. So let's start. All right. Here's what I want you to do for a bell ringer. I want you to think of one invention that was created during your lifetime and explain how it has changed people's lives or how it might change the lives of people in the future. So, honestly, I'd like you to stop the recording and just think about it. You're not writing anything down, you're just thinking about it, and then come back when you've come up with an idea. All right? Okay, welcome back, friends. I was thinking about this one invention created during my lifetime: portable phones. Yes, believe it or not, growing up, I did not have portable phones. We had one house phone, and it was on a cord in our kitchen. And then I remember we got a portable phone for my father because he was a doctor and he needed to have a phone so he could call patients and the hospital could call him. And I just remember how that totally affected our lives. He would take that silly, humongous phone, because it had to be at least 12 inches big, long, and he would put it in his jacket pocket. And I remember him getting calls at the weirdest times. And that never happened before. He used to have a beeper before that. So the phone, the portable phone, totally changed our lives. I could take the phone when my dad didn't have it and bring it in my room if I was expecting a call. And that way you could have some privacy, because we didn't have any privacy talking on the phone in the kitchen. So that did change my life. So just that one simple aspect of my civilization had such a big impact. So that's kind of what we're going to do. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at different early civilizations and some of the things that they created and how they impacted those people's lives. All right. So we should be on page 35 in your workbook. Everybody should be on page 35. So we're going to start with the development of cuneiform. All right. Cuneiform was a system of writing created by the Sumerians in ancient Mesopotamia. Remember, Mesopotamia is what is currently Iraq, most of it anyway, and it entailed all of the land surrounding the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Sumerians were one of the city-states that lived there, and they came up with this system of writing. It used wedge-shaped indentations on clay tablets. So if you look at the picture here, you can see all of those different indentations, and they each stood for something different. So this is really our first form of written language. The Sumerians used this written language to keep track of their business transactions. Think about it. If they had not invented written language, I don't know how they would have communicated with others and conducted business, right? So this is form of writing. The civilization would be Mesopotamia. So you can stop the video if you want to type your notes in. Just remember to press play to keep going. Welcome back, my friends. Let's look at the impact of the Sumerians' form of writing. We know that cuneiform was used later to create other alphabets in Mesopotamia. So different people were able to create their own written languages based on cuneiform. The next one says it transformed our understanding of history. Keep in mind that cuneiform is way older than the Bible, but people long ago didn't have any other resources to find out what life was like during this ancient time. So a lot of people got their history from the Bible. Well, cuneiform existed long before the Bible. So once cuneiform was translated, historians could study it and learn other aspects of history that took place even before the Bible was created. So it gives us a different version of history that might be different than that told in the Bible. We also know that cuneiform, once it was used as writing, influenced other early civilizations like the ancient Egyptians, and then influenced other classical societies like the ancient Greeks and Romans. So cuneiform was very important and it had a great impact on people. Again, if you need to stop the video so that you can type these, feel free. All right, everyone, we're back, and our next aspect of civilization is the city of Mohenjo-Daro. This is a picture of a representation of Mohenjo-Daro. Okay, this is a city that was built around 2600 BCE in the Indus River Valley. We know that was one of the earliest civilizations, right? And Mohenjo-Daro ended up being the largest and most sophisticated of the earliest cities. It contained around 35,000 residents. They created the very first sanitation system. They had sewers that were capable of bringing waste out of their homes and out of their cities. They also had indoor baths. We're talking around 2600 BCE. So that is remarkable. They designed their city streets to be laid out in a grid design, which is very, very sophisticated. So again, this is in the Indus River Valley on the Indian subcontinent, which is part of Asia. Okay, if you need to stop the video, feel free, just press play to continue. All right, friends, welcome back. We're going to talk about the impact of Mohenjo-Daro. Mohenjo-Daro is an example of several different things. One, urbanization, which is the creation of cities. Okay, it's one of the very earliest and largest cities that ever existed in the world. And they used sophisticated planning when they laid out the city streets in a grid design. They also used superior building techniques that are going to influence other people in other cities. We know that the drainage systems, the sewer systems that they created in Mohenjo-Daro are still mimicked. They're still used in modern day Pakistan and India. That's pretty impressive. Okay, and I already said that most modern cities are laid out in a very similar grid design. But if you want to put this in perspective, the very first city, modern city in the United States that was laid out in this similar grid pattern wasn't until the 1800s when the Mormons created Salt Lake City in Utah. They used this similar grid design for their city. So it took all of that time to be used here in the United States. Okay, again, stop the video if you need to continue typing. Like this, there we go. Ooh, here's a little film about Mohenjo-Daro. Let's just give it a whirl here, see what happens.
Mohenjo-Daro is one of the first urban centers in human history. Nestled in southern Pakistan's Indus River Valley, Mohenjo-Daro is the largest and best preserved city of the Indus civilization, the earliest known civilization of the Indian subcontinent. Mohenjo-Daro was built around 2500 BC, about the same time the Great Pyramids were being built in Egypt, and it spanned a surface area of nearly 500 acres, an incredible size for a city of this time period. Because of Mohenjo-Daro's grand scale, archaeologists believe it may have served as a seat of power for the Indus civilization. The city was divided into two districts, the Citadel and the Lower Town. The Citadel is home to the city's exceptional monuments, including the Great Bath, a 900 square foot tank fed from the Indus River. Mohenjo-Daro also had a sophisticated water system. Houses had baths and toilets, and the town featured both an elaborate sewage system and fresh water in 700 wells throughout the city. The Roman baths, some of history's most famous waterway systems, weren't constructed until many hundreds of years after Mohenjo-Daro's Great Bath. Mohenjo-Daro has no places of worship or governance, such as palaces, royal tombs, or temples. This may indicate that the society was not built around state interests like the Egyptian and Mesopotamian societies at the time. Rather, the class structure of Mohenjo-Daro may have been relatively equal. The city's second district, the Lower Town, may demonstrate the society's egalitarian structure. The Lower Town, with its intricate water system, was home to between 20,000 to 40,000 people. Unlike many urban areas of its time, it was laid out in a grid system similar to modern-day city blocks. After approximately 600 years, the city collapsed. No one is quite sure why, but the cause could potentially have been a change within the culture, or in the path of the river. Without its crucial source of water, the city's residents may have moved away, leaving Mohenjo-Daro nearly abandoned. In 1911, nearly 4,000 years after the city fell into ruin, archaeologists paid their first visit. The ensuing decades of excavations have unearthed countless clues that tell the tale of Mohenjo-Daro, but it still holds secrets for us to discover.
All right, let's go back to our presentation. Okay, our next feature would be the social class system that was created in Egypt, ancient Egypt, along the Nile River Valley. Now, the Egyptians created a fairly rigid social class system, which means it was very difficult to move up in the different classes. Okay, usually where you were born tended to be where you stayed. Okay, and you can see up at the top you have the pharaoh, who was often seen as a god. Then you have your government officials, your soldiers, your scribes, who were people who could write and wrote down histories and took orders from the pharaoh and wrote messages, things like that. Then you have merchants, people who sold things, craftsmen who made things. Then you have the peasants, who are the ones who are going to be doing the work, a lot of the farming, and then a whole percentage of slaves. So, very rigid social class system. Okay, as I said, in Egypt, it was set up as a theocracy where religion is used to govern. And as I said a minute ago, the Pharaoh was seen as a god. People worshiped him just like they worshiped the other gods. Slaves and servants, who were the peasants, provided the majority of the labor in Egypt. They are the ones who built the cities. They are the ones who did the backbreaking work building the Egyptian pyramids. So this is in Egypt, and let's look at the impact that this social class system had. We know that this system allowed for a stable, well-ordered society in Egypt. Everyone, based on what class they were born into, had their own jobs and their own responsibilities. So it kept society going. So each group knew what their role was, and they completed their jobs based on their social class. Okay, if you need to stop the video, you can feel free to do that. Otherwise, we are moving on. Oops, that shouldn't be there. All right, the next one, still on page 35, is the Code of Hammurabi. Now, Hammurabi was the leader in Babylon, a city in Mesopotamia, a city-state. Hammurabi created a huge empire and created this legal code in order to create order. So it was created around 1754 BCE. The laws are inscribed on this pillar, which is decorated at the top with a representation of Hammurabi. Okay, so he was the ruler of Babylon, a city-state in Mesopotamia. Hammurabi would go and conquer most of the other city-states in Mesopotamia, thus creating the Babylonian Empire. And when you need to rule a large territory, you're going to need a legal code, a system of laws. Here are the inscripted laws. It's hard to see, but they're there. Okay, so there were a total of 282 laws, and they were inscribed on 12 of these huge stone monuments. And then they were placed all over the empire for people to read. Now, we've heard this phrase before, an eye for an eye. The rules were pretty strict, and the punishments were also fairly strict. For example, if you caused harm to someone, the same harm would come to you. In certain cases, they didn't always use corporal punishment, which is the use of physical violence against someone. Sometimes it would involve paying a fine. It was really based on your social class that determined what amount you would have to pay. If you harmed someone from a higher social class, the fine would be much larger than if you harmed someone from a lower class or even a slave. But in general, the punishments were pretty strict. We'll learn more about those at a later date. We're going to look at the Code of Hammurabi soon. Okay. Shouldn't be there either. So the impact of the Code of Hammurabi, it guaranteed that people had clear boundaries of their rights and duties. By placing the legal code all over the empire, everyone was expected to know how they were to behave. They knew what exactly would happen if they broke any kind of law. It was stated right there specifically. So everyone knew what the punishments would be for committing all of these different offenses. So basically, by having this legal code, it definitely did assure a certain degree of security. It is believed that there would be less violence, less crime, less harm against others, less falsely accusing people of crimes, because the punishment for that, by the way, was death. So it was designed to create a sense of security within the empire. Okay, and it helped maintain order in such a large empire. And in general, that is what legal codes do. Legal codes help rulers maintain order and stability in their empires. It helps rulers maintain their power. And then lastly, the Code of Hammurabi served as an example to the later Romans, who used many of these ideas contained in these 282 laws when they created their own legal code known as the 12 Tables, which we will also look at later. All right, my friends, welcome back. We are going to now take a look at the Egyptian shadoof. This is a shadoof right there. So let's look at the description. This is a hand-operated device that was made so that people could lift water easily from the river and then swing it over to wherever they needed to put it. You could put it next to the river, you could put it near a well, and it made getting water much easier. So the impact. Well, we know that the Egyptians lived in a desert-like climate, very dry and hot. So to grow food, they needed to get water. Remember, they're living near the Nile River. So they would use the shadoof to bring water from the river to their crops much more easily. Okay, so the importance of the shadoof is that it is so effective and so simple to make that it is still used in places in India and Egypt. So this shows that this still has an impact today from thousands and thousands of years ago. So it's still being used. That's fascinating, I think. Okay, our last one is oracle bones. I know you want to know what these are. Oracle bones were used in ancient China by the Shang dynasty to communicate with their ancestors and the gods. They believed that that was what they were doing. They were also used to tell the future. So, what they did is they took cow bones, or more frequently, tortoise shells, and they would create small holes in it and then heat a hot rod, and then put the rod in the holes, and that would cause the shell to crack. And then fortune tellers, called oracles, would interpret the cracks to find the answers to whatever they're asking. Now, you see this tortoise shell here, and it's got all this writing on it. So they would write their questions on these. They would put their hopes and anything they wanted the oracle to interpret. Again, an oracle is like a fortune teller. What is fascinating is that the Shang dynasty never left any real records of their existence. So for a long, long time, historians thought that they weren't even real, that they were a myth, these people, because they never found any evidence of them existing. Well, when they found oracle bones with this writing on it, they were able to slowly translate them, and they realized that this writing was the earliest form of Chinese writing. And it was such a huge find. It proved that the Shang dynasty really existed. And what's even more cool is they listed all of their rulers on it. And so scholars, historians, have been able to make a list of all of the rulers in order just based on their being mentioned on these oracle bones, because the Shang dynasty left no other written records. So that is so cool. Proved that they were there. All right, I think we're done. Okay, so hopefully you have filled out your workbook on pages 35 and 36 and learned all about the different accomplishments or aspects of civilization that all of these different early civilizations created. So we are good, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a great day.